That is what happens. So shame starts shaping behaviors. Avoidance of shame starts shaping behaviors. For example, because I believe I am unlovable, that leads to shame. So the brain asks internally, what can I do to avoid feeling this painful experience? So what happens is I become a people pleaser. When I become a people pleaser, they will not reject me. I believe I am unlovable. When I become a people pleaser, they will not reject me, and that will not hurt me. When they do not reject me, I will not feel shame and I won't be hurt. So that is what the brain does. I become a people pleaser. I become a fame seeker. I badly want to be famous, not knowing that it is because I internally believe I am unlovable. So, when the brain believes when I become famous, I will not be rejected. Because I will not be rejected, I will not feel shame. So the brain builds behaviors to avoid shame. That is how shame shapes behaviors. Because I am unlovable, I start clinging to relationships. That is a belief. I am unlovable. I start clinging to relationships. Because internally the brain believes I am supposed to hold on to a relationship even when it does not work. Why? Because when they reject me, I will feel shame, and shame hurts. So I become the kind of a person that clings to relationships. Even when a relationship is actually not working out, I cling to it. So that is how shame shapes behaviors. And ladies and gentlemen, we all have tendencies of operating in shame and fear, and these shape false identities about the self, and we keep operating in them, and these start influencing behaviors. For example, protective mechanisms. Now, becoming a people pleaser is a protective mechanism. And then I become a fame seeker. I can become arrogant. The arrogance is a protective mechanism. I become arrogant so that people do not question me a lot, so that people do not ask me a lot of questions. Why? Because internally I believe if they ask a lot of questions, they might find out what I am internally. So the self believes I am flawed, so no one should know this. Let me hide it. So arrogance becomes a way to mask a perceived defect in me. I become arrogant. I start clinging to relationships. I start tolerating disrespect. I start avoiding people. Avoidance. For example, I can become shy, not knowing why. But because internally I believe I am unlovable, so I believe when I shy away, when I hide away from people, they will not see the flaws in me. So this is how shame shapes behavior. Now, what happens is, shame might build all these behaviors, and I conclude, because I do not know that internally there is a false identity that I carry, I might think this is who I am. That is how I was born, not knowing it is because of a false identity that it is now shaping behaviors. When I am a people pleaser, I internally believe this is who I am. Me, I was born like that. Why is it so easy to believe this? Because these behaviors at times form when we are very young, when we are not even reasoning, when we do not even understand what is taking place. These behaviors form when we are very young at times, and at times they form when we have grown up, and then we start working in them. So it feels like this is who I am. I am a people pleaser. I am always clinging to relationships. Because I believe I am unlovable, I can become violent. Why? Because internally I believe when I hurt others, first they will not hurt me. All those behaviors. So I can become violent because of a false identity, a false belief about the self. I am unlovable. It starts shaping behaviors. That is what shame does, ladies and gentlemen. That is one example. That is how shame operates. For example, if I believe I am unlovable, I can become a people pleaser, fame seeker, clinging, arrogant, tolerating disrespect. I can become the kind of a person that avoids relationship, that withdraws from relationships, a person that sabotages relationships, not knowing why, but because of a false identity, because of a false belief that I carry internally. For example, in Eden, when man knew he was naked, he covered himself. When man knew he was naked, he covered himself. So shame led to the covering. When he feared, he hid from God. That is fear. So like I said, I'll be giving more examples. I'll be using metaphors. I'll be using frameworks. I'll be using observable patterns. I'll be using studies to help us understand the Word of God and to know how to apply it. This does not mean that the frameworks that I use replace the Word of God. They just help us to understand and to know how to apply the Word of God. I am going to give a simple example so that we get to know how shame operates. Remember, we are talking about shame and fear, but for now, shame. These two conditions, or these two emotions, or these two states were activated in man in Eden. And because we all operate in a sinful world, we all inherited the sinful nature. So we have tendencies of operating in shame and fear. Now, this is how I can explain shame. Let's say one day, this is me. This is me walking on a dusty road. One way I can explain shame is this is me, an example. So that we get to know how shame works, or shame operates. Let's say one day I was walking on a dusty road. This is a dusty road. The road that has a lot of dust on it. This is me walking on a dusty road one day. Because I was walking on a dusty road, I was all filled with dust. This is dust. Every part of my body, dust. Because I was walking on a dusty road, I was all filled up with dust, every part of my body. This is dust. I was walking on a dusty road and I was filled up with dust on every part of my body, including the clothes. The whole of me was lost in dust. Dust everywhere. Now, because I was filled with dust everywhere I went, people were laughing at me. Look at him. What is wrong with him? What has happened to him? Because I was walking on a dusty road, I was all filled up with dust. Then everyone laughed at me. You know, it is not good when I am laughed at. That is a bad experience. It is bad when they laugh at me. This is a one-time event. Me walking on a dusty road. I was all filled up with dust and everyone laughed at me. Wherever I passed, people laughed at me. They broke into laughter and laughed at me. Because it feels bad to be laughed at. I feel shame. I feel embarrassed. Yes, it happened. It was a one-time event. So when I go back home, I wash myself clean, I bathe, I wash my clothes, I bathe very well, and I am now fine. I am now fine. I do not have dust anymore. I do not have dust on the clothes. What happens is, ladies and gentlemen, Every time I am walking on the same road, not actually on the same road, but every time I am walking on any road, thus the past experience is activated in me, and it feels like I am dusty again. Because of a bad experience that I passed through, I start believing that I am now dusty, and every time I believe, and because I believe that I am still filled in dust, I start behaving like dust is all over me. Because of a one-time experience that made me dusty, that because I was walking on a dusty road one day and I was filled up with dust. This is internalized in me that I am dusty. This is a one-time experience. It was a one-time experience. I was walking on the road and dust was filled all over me. I was lost in dust. So the brain believes that it wasn't just a one-time experience. It starts believing that that is who I am. I am still filled up in dust. That is what shame does. The brain believes that a one-time event now shapes who I am. For example, I was walking on a dusty road. I was filled up with dust. The brain now believes that I am dusty. Ladies and gentlemen, it believes this is who I am because I believe that I am still filled up in dust. So this starts shaping behaviors like I become the kind of a person that bathes 7 times a day. I bathe 7 times a day, not knowing why, but because internally I believe I am still filled up with dust. So I try each and everything possible to remove that dust. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how shame works. Because of a one-time experience, it is turned into a global interpretation of the self. Because I was walking on a dusty road one day, the brain believes I am still filled up with dust. So now the experience starts defining me. Because I was walking, because I walked on a dusty road one day and I was all filled up with dust, the brain believes, or I believe internally, I am still dirty because of that dust that I accumulated. So that is how shame works. So this starts shaping behaviors. I start bathing 7 times a day. So externally, I might believe like I am a very clean person. I am very organized. I am very clean. That is who I am because I bathe 7 times a day, not knowing it is because of a belief internally that I am still filled up with dust. Time comes when I bathe like 2 hours. I bathe for 2 hours. I bathe 7 times a day, but I spend 2 hours in the bathroom bathing because internally I believe I am still dusty. So it is a one-time experience that is now shaping behaviors. That is what happens, ladies and gentlemen. Because I walked on a dusty road one day, the brain believes I am still dusty. Because internally I believe I am dusty, I start avoiding places where I will be judged according to what I believe I am. What happens is, because when I was dusty, people laughed at me. So I start avoiding passing via that place where I saw people and they laughed at me. I start avoiding places where I will be laughed at. Even when I dress up very perfectly and I am clean, internally I believe I am dusty. Internally I believe I am still filled up with dust. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what happens. So shame leads to these behaviors. For example, I now start avoiding some places because internally I believe I am still dusty. So I avoid some behaviors, and as well I avoid some other people. Avoidance. I avoid some other, not knowing why. Internally, I believe I do not like those people, not knowing it is because I believe I am dusty and they will laugh at me, even when it is not the truth. It was a one-time event. So that one-time event becomes a global interpretation of the self, ladies and gentlemen. All that happened because man was separated from God and man started knowing good and evil. So knowing good and evil, man starts interpreting events according to himself, according to what he thinks, according to what he understands. So because of the wrong interpretation, I might end up with a wrong conclusion about the self, and that wrong conclusion becomes an identity that I operate in. So according to this experience, I walked once on a dusty road and I was all filled up with dust. Now I believe internally I am dusty. I am Mr. Dusty because of a one-time event. So the brain generalizes it like this is who I am. So because I internally believe that is who I am, I as well project the same belief. I as well project the same to other people. So I believe other people see me the same way. Because I internally believe I am dusty, so I believe other people are seeing me the same way. Yet, this is a wrong interpretation of the self. So ladies and gentlemen, that is what happens. So I start building avoidance behaviors. I start building behaviors of performance. I perform because I believe internally something is wrong with me. So ladies and gentlemen, that is how it operates. Because I walked on a dusty road one day, I now believe I am dusty. I build behaviors. I start bathing 7 times a day. I spend 2 hours in a bathroom bathing. I start avoiding people. I start avoiding places. Why? I now fear to be judged according to the perceived flow that is in me. But remember, this flow is not real. It is not real. It is just perceived. It is just believed. So because internally I believe it, I start avoiding other people. I start avoiding places. I start bathing 7 times. That is how shame and fear shape behavior. Because I fear to be judged, I start avoiding people. Because I believe I am flawed, I start bathing 7 times a day. Fear and shame are now shaping behaviors. And this becomes me because I keep on believing internally that I am dusty. Because I believe it, I avoid people. That belief is not challenged in me. Because it is not challenged, it keeps persisting. I keep operating in it. Why? I avoid all situations that would challenge it. Why? For example, here, I avoid other people who might tell me you are smart. Because I internally believe they will judge me, I rather avoid them. So that wrong belief internally is not challenged, so I keep operating in it. I start walking with a towel. That is another behavior. I walk with a towel. I become extra careful about each and everything. I start overly cleaning myself. Those that are seeing me outwardly believe this guy is very smart. This guy is very organized, not knowing it is a false identity that is shaping these behaviors. I start walking with a towel. Every 5 minutes, I clean myself. And I might not as well know I believe this, but it is externally shaping behaviors. So ladies and gentlemen, that is how shame and fear operate. For example, because I failed once at school, because I failed exams, because I failed exams at school, this experience of failing starts interpreting who I am. When I wrongly interpret this experience that I failed exams, it can change into I am a failure. Because I failed exams, it can change into I am a failure. Now this becomes an identity that I believe and I start operating in. What happens? Because I believe I am a failure, it activates shame. When it activates shame, shame is a painful experience. So the brain starts building behaviors to avoid failing again, because it believes when I fail, it hurts. When I fail, I will be ashamed again. So, because of the fear of failure, I now change who I am, or the brain now builds behaviors to avoid failing again. What happens? I failed exams and I internalize that I am a failure. So this becomes a false identity that I walk in. When I believe that I am a failure, that is a perceived flaw. It feels painful because I believe that I am below a required standard. So that becomes an identity. It leads to shame. When it leads to shame, shame is a painful experience. Shame is distressing. Shame is painful. Shame is persistent. Shame is discomforting. So the brain says, I will build behaviors so that I avoid failing again. Why? Because every time I fail, I feel shame, and shame is painful. So now fear of failure, or fear of failing, starts shaping behaviors. So I am a failure becomes like an eternal wound in me. So fear of failing starts shaping behaviors. I become a perfectionist. I become a procrastinator. I become arrogant. I become extra careful. Because I fear to fail, I become a people pleaser. I become overly controlling. I want to manage each and everything by myself because I do not want to fail again. So I want to manage each and everything. So I become overly controlling. I start competing with others. Competition. Because I fear to fail. Every time I see someone who does something better, I want to compete with them because internally I believe if they are better than me, I am a failure. So fear of failing is now shaping behaviors. I become a very competitive person. I become the kind of a person that is envious about others and jealousy because internally I believe I am a failure. I become the kind of a person that is never satisfied with results. It does not matter how much I achieve. I am not satisfied with results. So fear of failing is now shaping my behaviors, and now I am a failure as a false identity is as well shaping behaviors. But it is because of a one-time event. I failed in exams. What happens is, because I failed once in exams, I start operating in that false identity. Like that is who I am. So every experience that proves I am a failure adds a layer to this false identity. Let's say I failed in exams, and when, let's say we had a competition at school, I was not the best. So that solidifies the false identity. Indeed, I am a failure. Let's say as I am trying to find a job, I try 2 times and fail. This proves the false identity that it is indeed true. I am a failure. So more experiences that I go through cement that false identity and I start operating in it and I start believing it. Remember, when I fear to fail, I might become the kind of a person that avoids. I avoid all opportunities, or I avoid all experiences that might confirm this belief. I become the kind of a person that avoids relationships, that avoids jobs, that avoids opportunities. I can become the kind of a person that wants comfort. I just want to be in a place where I am not challenged. Why? I fear to fail. Any challenge can portray who I believe I am. So I avoid challenges. I become the kind of a person that withdraws easily. All these behaviors. But remember, every time I withdraw easily, every time I avoid, the belief is not challenged. If it is not challenged, it keeps persisting. Every time I avoid, the belief is not challenged. When it is not challenged, it keeps persisting. And ladies and gentlemen, it does not matter how much I achieve, as long as I still believe I am a failure. All that cannot remove it until the belief is healed, until the false identity is healed. I keep operating in it. It does not matter how much I make. It does not matter how big I achieve. When the belief is not healed, nothing can satisfy me. So I can become an overworker. All these behaviors are to avoid or to mask a perceived flaw in me. I am a failure. Until this is healed, it does not matter what I do. It does not matter what I do. That belief keeps persisting until it is healed. Remember, it is only God that can give us his true standard, so that fear loses its authority over us. According to the book of 1 John chapter 4 verse 18, perfect love casts out fear, and that perfect love flows from God, because John chapter 4 verse 8 says, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. So the perfect love is supposed to be given to us by God, which heals fear, which heals shame. So that is how shame shapes behaviors and fear as well.